Lorraine and Marty are parked, and Lorraine whips out some booze she swiped from the old lady's liquor cabinet. In the movie, Marty says she shouldn't drink because
you might regret it later in life,
referencing her alcoholism. But in the book she's more into cake than booze, so instead he says the weaker,
well, it's just not healthy.
And it would have been awesome if she'd snuck cake into her purse instead of gin, but oh well. Then Lorraine busts out the ciggies and Marty says,
"Geez, you smoke too?"
His voice sounding terribly strident.
And Lorraine says,
"Marty, you're beginning to sound just like my mother."
And that's where the scene ends in the movie. And may I just say, great reaction, Michael J. Fox. Guess what, the scene keeps going here so we can all learn how bad cigarette smoking is. And I'm not the biggest fan of smoking, but even I find this scene totes preachy. But it gets us some future laughs, and that's something, right? Here's what happens. Marty says smoking is dangerous. Lorraine says she sort of understands that it's not ladylike to drink, but that smoking is nice. Marty asks if she's kidding and says everything's wrong with it. Lorraine asks if that's so, then why is it advertised on TV? Marty replies that the cigarette lobby is too powerful. We all learn a valuable lesson about how politics really works. Lorraine then replies that it's good for circulation. Marty says it'll give her lung cancer and shows her on the package the Surgeon General's warning. But did you forget that this scene takes place in 1955? Because haha, book Marty did. Even though he's been in this time for a week at this point. Book Marty instead reads a line from the package bragging that
this fine blend of Turkish and domestic tobaccos calms the nerves, improves the circulation, gives you a sense of well-being.
Marty talks and whistles at the same time.
Good God. Marty whistled. He handed the pack back. Somehow he'd avoided smoking all his life and he wasn't about to start now.
Anyway, the irony in this scene of Lorraine doing things that as an adult she said she'd never do was kinda hard to pick up, right? Some people might miss that. Best make it explicit.
Lorraine regarded him with an irritated glare. You know, you sound just like my mother, she said. It's really stupid the way parents don't understand their kids and try to run their lives for them. When I have kids, I'm gonna let them do anything they want. Anything. And I'm not gonna lecture them or say how it was different back in the good old days when I was young. No, sir, they're not gonna get any of that crap from me. I'd sure like to have that promise in writing, Marty smiled.
And while Lorraine's speech and Marty's line didn't appear in the movie, they did use a bit of it in the sequel and just stone cold acted like they appeared in the movie the first time around. Okay, a lot of stuff happens on the next 2 pages. So let's get right to it. None of it's in the movie though. Marty and Lorraine are still in the car and Marty's looking for George, but he lies to Lorraine and tells him he's looking out for Mr. Strickland. Lorraine says that he's got enough to worry about inside, slides up close to him, and asks him about his parents. But it's a really convenient line because it lets Marty say,
lately I've come to the conclusion that I don't know anything about them.
Oh snap. Nice ad, Gipe. Then we're back with George inside the school. George feels sick about this whole plan. And the way Gipe describes how George feels is amazing.
George felt weak and cold and on the verge of fainting, like the time he'd stuck his finger in the gears of a portable cement mixer his father had rented and nearly severed the end of it.
It's emotional description, backstory, and insanely useless detail. The cement mixer was a rental. Write that down, the reader needs to know that. Plus it's a Family Guy like that time Ironside all in one. Anyway, this portable cement mixer level of pain is giving him stomach problems.
Too powerfully unrelenting to ignore.
So he goes to poop. And it's new character time with class prankster Mark Dixon. Only it turns out he's not new because turns out Mark is the dude who put the kick me sign on George earlier. We'll cut in on George's dance with Lorraine where he says,
"Scram, McFly, cutting in."
Locks George in the washroom in the scene coming up. locks George in a telephone booth in a deleted scene from the movie based on this novel scene coming up. So what happens is that due to his powerfully unrelenting spasms, George slams the bathroom door open really hard.
So hard it seemed as if raid were in progress.
Huh? Anyway, Dixon. Gipe consistently refers to this character by his last name for some reason, thinks it's Strickland and drops his cigarette in the urinal.
That son of a bitch made me lose my last weed. He's gonna have to pay for that.
Dixon says and ambles towards the stall George is in. Back to the car. This paragraph coming up is something. I've mentioned before how the movie does a lot of work to make the plan involving Marty and Lorraine as palatable and non-rapey as possible, but this book is doing the opposite, going so far as to describe what's about to happen as
an assault.
Yep. Also, it has Gipe describing what women want and has a hypothetical Lorraine concluding that Marty is retarded. Let's begin, shall we?
Acutely aware that there is a fine line during which a woman can be romanced successfully, Marty sat nervously in Doc Brown's Packard, Lorraine's hip firmly pressed against his. She was ready to be kissed and then touched, hopefully just enough to insult her, create fear and anger and the need for a new champion to rescue her. Marty's dilemma was one of timing. If he went after her too soon, he would be forced to continue the assault until George came, and perhaps it would be over too soon. If, on the other hand, he continued sitting here like a genial lump, Lorraine might conclude that he was either retarded or that she had no appeal. In either case, her next logical move would be out of the car, back to the dance and out of his life, probably forever. Where the hell is that chicken shit father of mine? Marty thought.
I think the best note to conclude on here is that she was ready to be kissed and then touched is the best title for a romance novel ever, and if any of you have a completed novel but need a title, this one is kinda perfect in every conceivable way.